Have you ever had the thought, if I just keep going like this, where does this actually lead me? Not in a dramatic way, not in a burnt out, everything is falling apart way, but in a quiet, honest moment where you realize, I don't actually know if this path leads to the life I want. Because this is what I found is most people don't wake up one day and decide to build a life they don't love. They slowly build it by accident through default decisions, unquestioned routines, opportunities they say yes to without thinking long term. And over time, they look up and realize this works, but it doesn't feel like mine. So today, I want to talk about something deeper than just goal setting or time management. I want to talk about intentional living at a leadership level because the life you want, it doesn't come from doing more. It comes from designing differently. Well, I'm your host, Shayla. I'm a small business coach, leadership strategist, and someone who truly believes that building a business should help you build a life you love, not take over the one you already have. Well, most people are optimizing a life they never chose. And this is what I've seen from coaching hundreds of leaders and entrepreneurs is people are incredibly good at improving systems they never intentionally created. They optimize their schedule, they optimize their income, they optimize their routines, but they never stop and ask, is this even the life I want to optimize? Now, if you don't prioritize your life, somebody else will. And I remember reading that and thinking, that's exactly what happens in business too. You build based on what clients want, what opportunities come up, what seems logical, but not always what's aligned. And over time, you don't have a bad life. You just have one you didn't consciously choose. Now, you're not stuck. You're just unclear on trade offs. And this is a big reframe. Most people say, I feel stuck. But what I've kind of found is that they're not necessarily stuck. They just haven't decided what they're willing to trade. Because every life comes with trade-offs: freedom versus stability, growth versus comfort, flexibility versus structure. And when you avoid choosing, you end up with a version of all of them that doesn't fully satisfy you. And so instead of consciously choosing trade-offs, we inherit them. And that's where misalignment starts. Now, your identity is quietly running this show. And here's something that changed everything for me is you don't build your life based on your goals, you build it based on your identity. And this is something I've seen play out time and time again. And so this is where our identity-based behaviors can really stand out. And when we start to see ourselves as someone who figures it out as I go, or someone who takes what comes, someone who doesn't want to disappoint people, then what happens is we keep building a life that reflects that identity, not the life I actually want. So the question often becomes is who do I need to become to build this life on purpose? Now, busyness is the most socially accepted distraction. And this one might hit a bit because what I found is that busyness makes you feel productive without forcing you to be intentional, and it's rewarded. People praise how much you're doing, how hard you're working, how full your schedule is, but no one really asks, is this actually moving your life forward? And so this can sort of connect to this idea of how shallow work creates sometimes that illusion of progress. And I've seen this in business owners all the time. They're doing so much, but not the things that actually shape their future. Now, alignment can feel slower at first, but faster over time. And this is something I had to learn the hard way. When you start making intentional decisions, it can feel like things slow down. You say no more, you rethink things, you restructure, and it can feel like you're losing momentum. But what I've seen is that alignment compounds faster than effort ever will. Because once things are aligned, decisions become easier, energy becomes consistent, growth becomes sustainable. And so when we narrow our focus, it actually accelerates our results. Now, you cannot build a dream life with reactive leadership. And reactive leadership looks like waiting for those problems or responding to what's urgent, letting circumstance dictate direction. And most people live this way without realizing it. But intentional leadership, it's proactive. It's deciding where you're going, what matters, what gets your time and energy. And this is something I've personally had to grow into because reacting feels productive, but leading requires courage. And one of the biggest mindset shifts that I've had is that fulfillment comes from congruence, not achievement. Achievement doesn't automatically create fulfillment. And I see this not just in myself, but in so many high performers. They hit goals and then they think, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? And this is where meaning, not success, is what really drives that fulfillment. And so, what I found is that fulfillment comes when your actions match your values, your time reflects your priorities, and your life feels like yours. Now, growth requires you to outgrow versions of yourself. And this is where it gets real because building your life on purpose means letting go of versions of yourself that got you here. And that's uncomfortable. And something that's talked about in a book that I love called The Big Leap is the idea of upper limits, where we subconsciously hold ourselves back from expanding. And I've seen this in business and in leadership constantly, is people say they want more, but they're still operating as the version of themselves built for less. Now, our environment will either reinforce or resist your intentional life. You cannot build a different life in the same environment that supports your current one. And this is why proximity matters so much. And when environment and even our financial mindset shapes those outcomes, and when we change our environment, your standards start to rise, your overthinking expands, your actions lift without forcing it. Now, the real shift, and you have to start acting like it's already decided, is this is the shift that changes everything. Not that I hope it works out, but this is the life I'm building. Now, my decisions need to match that because this is what I found is that clarity without action just creates more frustration. But action without clarity creates burnout. But clarity and intentional action, this is where alignment lives. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I need to get more intentional with how I'm building my life and my business, this is exactly why I created the LFG Business Academy on Skool. It's not just about business growth. It's about learning how to think like a leader, creating structure that actually supports your life, building something that feels aligned, not just successful. And it's completely free. And you can start applying this immediately. Now, I'll leave you with this. You don't accidentally build a life you love. You either design it or you inherit it. And if you don't choose your direction, your habits will, your environment will, your past decisions will. But the moment you start living on purpose, everything shifts. And this is something I've been thinking about building and honestly putting into words in a much deeper way lately. Because this idea of intentional leadership, it's not just a concept, it's a practice. And it's something I'm really excited to share more of you with soon. So as always, your dream life starts with the way that you lead, the way that you live, and the way that you grow. I'll see you next time on your Dream Coach podcast.